Hello, everybody. We're going to jump into quick estimating. Um, I'm going to show you essentially we're going to look at some plans. We're going to look at how to make up a real quick estimating book, which essentially is spreadsheets, and to get you started on your first project. All right, I'm going to share screens now, and here we go. All righty, so take a look here. What we got is modeling estimate. So this is the reason why I call it sandbox estimating is because in a sandbox you can draw some lines in the sand and then you can erase it real easy, and you can go on about figuring stuff out quite easily in a sandbox. And that's why I call it sandbox. You can call it whatever you want, but that's the reason why it's called that. Modeling estimates. So let's say you're a carpenter and you build decks as one of your products. You build fences, 3 or 4 different types of fences as another one of your products. Um, Maybe a house, maybe you do that, or a garage, or some component thereof. So each one of those should have a model built to it. For example, to build a deck, it takes you your pier blocks. First, you're excavating your layout. Let's go backwards. Your demolition of existing, excavating, put in your pier blocks, put in your joists and posts, build your subframe, put in your blocking, put in your flashing, and then put in your install your uh, decking. Then you have to add your handrail and your trim, and then finish it out with either sanding, patching, hole patching, or sealing, or all of the above. So that's pretty much the standard. And all that's changing is the size, the access, the type of materials. Okay, generally your framing is going to be Doug fir or um, pine or whatever is in your area for structural. And your your decking can be anywhere, well, heck, anything from teak to red ironwood or ironwood. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to deck it. So that's something you're going to have to figure out, and you can figure out by material. But your model will reflect. So when you click on a book, when you create your estimating book, you want one specific for that. Okay, so for decks, this is the book I'm going to use, and that's how you model that book. And you do the same thing for each of your products, not your tasks, but your products. You can also do it for tasks, like if you do major tasks, like if you're a foundation person, right? If that's what you do, you can definitely do it for tasks as well. But essentially, that's what you do. That's what I mean by modeling your estimate. Workflows and obstacles. So workflow, if for some reason you're walking the job, getting ready to bid on it, and you're taking a look at it. Can I get a truck in here? Can I get an excavator in here? What's in the way? What's going to be a problem? What kind of equipment can I use? All that stuff. And then how am I going to work that flow through? So let's get away from uh, deck building and let's go into more of a, um, let's say you're building a fire station. Okay. The fire station is in a neighborhood that already has power lines and everything else. You've got a workflow, you got to get your crane in there, you got to get all sorts of other stuff in there. That low-lying power line is an obstacle. It will create a problem during a certain workflow of your project. So not a problem during layout, not a problem during excavating, not a problem during anything until you need to get that crane on site. Now it's a problem. And that's where we talk about workflow. So you got to identify the sequence of stuff going on, create a logistics plan based on a schedule, a timeline, and then obstacle interference during that timeline and the workflow that you need to see ahead of that. So and then we're going to talk about material takeoffs and production rates. I did a much more in-depth one, production rates and takeoffs in the estimating modules. So if you're interested in learning how to estimate, jump into that module and take a couple of those courses. But I will briefly touch it on this one as well. And then contingency and complexity adjustments. Again, I talked about that in an estimating module. I think it was called rates and markups. So take a look at that. We will briefly talk about it here, but it goes into more depth there, and that's plenty of information. All right. So first things first, we're going to look at modeling and estimate. And we're going to look at this one. All right. So I went ahead and created this spreadsheet. It didn't take long. Essentially, what I wanted to do is create a spreadsheet model, a template, if you will, to essentially just write up anything that's required for the project. All right. In the very first tab, I have executive input. That means you're going to put in your hourly rate that you're going to apply to all the hours on this job. You get to adjust all these numbers here. Your contingency, your complexity, your percentage of overhead, and your profit margins. So that's all done in percentages. You change it the way you want to change it. These are automatic. Okay, if you take a look at it, this comes from the project breakdown sheet, and I'll show you that. This is your total estimate, and it multiplies itself times everything that's up here, and then adds it to the total cost. There's easier ways to write this. I wanted to make it simple so you could do the same thing. Just keep it simple. You're multiplying this H1 is actually the total cost of goods minus total cost of goods, including labor cost. And so this gets charged times by 3. So B3 is contingency, that percentage, plus, so that gives you 10% on the total cost for contingency. This one gives you 20% percentage on complexity and overhead and whatnot. So you see, and it's just adding those up. And then of course, you've got to add up, oops, sorry, let me do it this way. Then you have to add up B6, which is your profit, and then you have to add up the total estimate, H1, and that comes from over here. We'll talk about that right now. All right. So you use this to manipulate, play around with, get comfortable to see what your final price is. And these man hours automatically come up. Oops, this should be total man hour. Okay. All right. So I wrote this little page real quick. Typical stuff. I always like to put my totals at the top. Let's make this so it's a little bit more obvious. How about this? We'll just do this number. All right. So my totals are at the top. This is instructions on what these columns represent. And see these little black boxes? I'm going to show you how to do that here, but let's get an idea of what's going on. So let's go to, let's go ahead and let's do the fire station. So we're going to stake the fire station. Staking is essentially laying out where the fire station is going to be. It's a survey. So we're going to stake it so the excavators can get in and do their job. And so that's typically an operator's job. So I know it's going to take some equipment. So I got to get an excavator. I've got to get, I've got to get uh, the total station for the surveyor. I've got to pay for the surveyor and the stakes. So what I also like to do here, I just like to drag it down, keep it simple. And then here I'm going to be adding material because I know it's going to it can be a lump sum price right here. And essentially I'm going to need stakes, I'm going to need flagging, stuff like that. So that's, what is that, $60 worth of materials? I know that's light. We're just keeping track of what's going on. All right, the next thing we're going to do after staking and all that, then excavation is going to be rough grade. All right. And you're doing this to get a fair idea of what your estimated costs will be. So rough grade's going to probably take you and one other person 3 days to do this. So 8 hours a day times two people, 16 hours a day times 3 days. So you can do it like this. So 16 times 3, if that's what you want to do, you can do it like that. I kind of like doing it this way because when I go back and take a look at it in the future, I can go in and click on it and I see, okay, I've got two guys, 16 hours, and I think it's going to take 3 days. So that gives me 48 hours. But I can, if I just wrote 48 in there, which is fine, you can do that. If I just wrote 48 in there, then I wouldn't know what I made this estimate based off of. But now I know, I mean, you could even do it like this: two guys times 8 hours times 3 days. You still end up with it. And that gives you, but be consistent. So your number of guys, persons, times the number of hours. And if you think it's going to be 10-hour days because you got to get her done, you got to schedule, you can go like that, right? And there you go. Then you come over here and you put hours in, okay? And this is, on this one, I should also, okay, here's what I'll do. This is perfect. All right, see how I was able to get these blocks to come up automatically? The reason why I'm having these block out is because I don't want you to put any numbers in the amounts. Okay, so if you're doing labor, I don't want it in amount. I want you to put it in manpower or man hours, right? If you're doing equipment, I don't want you writing in man hours. I want you to put it in the amount, the quantity. All right, let's call this quantity. All right, and that's the unit, and this is price per unit. You got it? So what I'm going to do here, I don't want to see these zeros either, because where this is being added up, it's these 76 hours are being added up by this whole row here, and this whole column rather. So 60 plus 16. See, it says sum D3 to D. So I can double click on that, and you see how that goes down. All right, that's what that means. So that's summing up all of my labor, all my man hours. And then here it's going back to our executive input to grab this number. All right, the hourly rate. We're going to play with that and show you how to change it. And it's taking this number times the hourly rate, and that's what that number is. This is taking the sum of everything down here and then adding it to that, to the total hours. There's a reason why I'm doing it this way. The main reason is I want to have my material costs, my equipment costs, and everything separated from my man hours. Okay. It makes it easier when you're looking to the future on your production rates. It also helps you figure out whether or not the cost, the failures. So if for some reason you're over budget, is it because my man hours were wrong and my crew sucked, or my thought of what they could do is poor, or something affected the hourly, the total man hours? Or is it because I missed something on the material costs? That type of thing. And I can figure that out here pretty easily. And that's about what I want to do. But what I don't want to do is see these zeros when it comes to man hours. So, because I don't want to come across here and add this up, that would be an error. and that would be doubling up costs. So there'd be some, it would be a bad thing. So here's how I'm going to do this. Again, I'm going to show you, you go over to here. So I highlight H. There's H3 right there. Hit colon again, hit H, hit enter. That takes it all the way down. And I go up to formatting. I hit conditional formatting. I'm going to put black in here. And I'm going to change this to custom formula. And I'm going to say, this formula I want effective equals when, let's see, C3 to C equals labor. Okay. And what will happen is it changes. I should also change that. So I want to change those numbers out. So I want let me pull this up. I want that to go to that color too, so it doesn't show through. All right. See how that works? So if I change this to materials, that's going to change. And I should have, well, you kind of want to see this because you're making an error here. But let's go back to labor. That's the way I want it. Okay, so you get an idea. You're going to go right through this whole thing. And part of rough grading is equipment. So you need equipment. And let's say you're going to have it for 2 days. Whoops, I don't have a day here. So I got to come over here and add a day. All right, so I come over here. I click on that. In the drop down, I add another one. Add another item. So per day. Okay, and I want to make this alphabetically correct so I can easily find it. And I hit done, apply to all. Okay, so now, and I close this out so I can see what I'm doing. Now I can click on day. So 2 days, it costs $450 a day, or let's say $550 a day. And this should come up, there you go, 1,010. And you just keep on doing this. So this is an automatic sum. So what I did here, in this column, I used an array formula. Like we talked about in other ones, I put in equals if error, that protects it if there's an error. I want, when there's not an error, I want array formula, which looks at all of these as an array. That means it's going all the way down the columns, all the way across the rows. All right, going down the columns. So please check. This is what row means. Ifs means if these are true, do this one. And it's individually. So here's the sequence. This row means A2 to A equals 2. I want you to look, I'm telling the computer, I want you to look from A2 to A. And if the row is equal to 2, then I want you to type in estimated value. Okay. That's if it's not true, I want you to go back and look at A2 to A, all the way down to the bottom, and check and see if there's nothing in it. All right, that's what that means when there's no value in there. If that's the case, I want there to be no value. True means it's telling the computer, okay, if none of that is true, then this is true. Okay, so if none of these are true, then this is going to be true. I want you to multiply G2 to G times E2 to E. And what this will do is it will multiply G2 times E2, G3 times E3, all the way down the line. That's how that works. And that's why it's an array formula. And that's how we're getting all these values here. So it's looking at G2, which is this one. Actually, this is G7, and it's multiplying it times E7. So 2 times, and that's how that works. And so you never put anything in here, because what happens, I'll show you. It gives you this error. This is what happens with the error. You got something in here and it will not override it. But you take that out of there and it automatically comes back. All right. So there we go. We got that. All right. So you go down the line and you write everything you can think of, equipment, materials, the whole works based on your scope and your task or element. And you just keep going down the line. All right. And no matter what, this you can keep adding more and more rows all the way down to 1,000,000 if you want. All the information for the executive input page is going to be obtained from the top row. So that protects you so you don't have to mess around with anything down below. Okay. During your job walk, you're going to be taking notes. You're going to look for these workflow and obstacle problems. Okay. For example, there's low hanging wires on the site entry and low enough where it's a problem for getting the crane in. So you have to have certain clearances away from power lines in order to bring equipment in or work underneath a power line. In fact, in a lot of cases, you're not allowed to work under the power line unless someone's insulated the power line with protection. And it's usually your utility company. But in this particular case, we have low hanging power lines. I can't get the crane in. And the only time that it's at the site entry, and it's going to happen during erection of steel, for example, or any type of hoisting of the HVAC. So there's impedance. You might want to write potential solution, um, utility to insulate or isolate, shut off. Sometimes they can isolate the line and shut off that power line from the transformer. In fact, we've had them cut the power going from one side of the street where it drops off the transformer, goes into a subgrade conduit. So we had them cut from the transformer to the conduit, leave the wires open for future tie-in, and the balance of the wire remained in the conduit all the way through so that we could remove the stuff we needed to remove to get in there with their equipment. And there's ways to do it. A utility company will tell you what you can do. And sometimes you have to be a little pushy. So anyhow, you can just keep going down the line, writing down all these impedances. Why is that important? Because you're going to figure out, based on those impedances and all those other problems that are in your workflow, um, and any complexities that are in your workflow, like you can't work between 7 and 8 because during that time, ambulances are running in and out to the emergency room that's immediately next door, and they don't want you to impede any of their emergency processes. Okay, so there's all sorts of crap that goes down in your workflow and obstacles. Contingency and complexity. All right, let's take a look at it. Let's say there's no on-site parking. Do I have to bus them in? Do I got to pay off-site parking? This is stuff you walk as part of your job walk. Do you make an adjustment for that? If you have to pay for their parking and you check it out and it's $30 per person to park, let's just say, per person per day. This is a benefit to the worker. You don't necessarily have to write that. Okay. So you're going to pay an additional $30 a day to your worker as a benefit. Something to note. Let's say you're working, the work is supposed to be in an occupied space, and they're requiring you to have some standby time, and it's going to affect manpower and cleaning. So they need you to have the site completely clean when the people come back between their break, so that there's no dust on their desk, on their computer screens, or anything like that. You have to be there and gone as if you were never there to begin with. Do your work, get out of there. That's a lot of work. That takes up at least an hour. So you got additional hour of standby time. Then you have some cleanup time. And when you figure that out, so 1 hour out of 8 hours is 12.5%. So you need to add 12.5% to your labor costs. Okay. So that's essentially what this is. And if you do all that, that gives you a pretty good idea on how to figure this out. So contingency, I should, you know what I should actually do? I should add this above the top. Now this is going to be a problem. Let's change this. Oops. Let's cut and paste. So Control X, Control V. All right, adjustment. We're not going to add an adjustment there. Let's see, what's 30 hours? What does that work out to be? That's a good question. How am I going to adjust that? It's like a half hour. It's less than a half hour. Let's say it's a third of an hour. Okay. So a third of an hour, 0.3 divide, oops, equals 0.3 divided by 8. And then we're going to say that that's a percentage. All right. We've gone up here. We're going to change this to uh, gray just for fun. Put in some white for fun. We're going to say total markup. I want to run this to the left to make it look pretty. There we go. And then we're going to say equals sum C3 colon to C. That takes it all the way down. So right now we're at 16.25%. Okay. So what we can do is we can manually come over here and put it in manually here. And that might be the right way to go. We can put a little note here for calculated percent, and make this equal to, let's call that equal to 50%. So it'd be the contingency and complexity price. All right. That price divided by 2. That's 50%. Okay. And we want to copy this. So here's the thing that I want you to learn. Highlight this guy all the way. Hit F4 and see how it adds these dollar signs in front of your C and in front of your one. That locks it. So if you didn't add that, when you pull it down, it would go to C2. Okay, and you'd end up with a wacky number. By locking it, it says this is the value I want, and I want it divided by 2. And these both should be percentages. Okay, so this way you can look at it and say, okay, you can compare when you get your total percentages back from your contingency planning. That's your total markup based on all these numbers. You can come back and now compare it. Overhead's interesting. Should I show you how to do it? Why don't I show you how to do a quick overhead? All right, I'm going to add worksheet. So overhead worksheet. Okay, real quick. I think we did this on another video. Let's say your office expenses, including all your manpower, all your officers' wages. Let's say that's 30,000 a month. Okay, and that includes your minimum wage. Okay, like we talked about early on the other getting started. All right, so that's a month. Job site, you're getting a trailer. It's probably on the other project breakdown, but you're getting a trailer. So, if you're going to add it to the other one, I would not worry about it. I'd add it as a material or equipment cost. So that's 30,000 a month. You've got 5 guys working. Let's see, your total crew across your whole company is 5 workers. Okay, so you got 5 workers. This is a way to do this. And then average uh, monthly hours. It's 160. 40 hours a week times 4 weeks, an average, right? Gives you 160. And so you end up with total hours per month. All right, equals this times 160. So 800 hours. These 800 hours, have to cover this. So let's say overhead percent is equal to 800 divided by 30,000. And this is a percent. So if you have 8 folks, that should not have gone up. What am I doing wrong here? That percentage should have gone down. So with 5 people, it should not be that. Okay, maybe I need to do something a little different. Let me insert a row below. Let's convert it into cash. So total cost field. Let me give this some thought here. I'm not exactly sure why that's not coming out right. So the total cost of the field is going to be 800 hours times that. Okay. Oops. That times 800. So that's 70,000. I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Okay. So this should be an allocation rate. And it is equal to total hours or total overhead divided by total hours. So that's your allocation rate for the month. Oops, should be B5. That's why it's looking weird. Hang tough, everybody. This should be B5. Okay, so that's your allocation rate. So what that means is I need to add that to the hourly rate to meet my overhead. So hourly rate is $88 equals this plus this $125. So if I don't bring this up to 8 people, for example, I'm going to be charging $111 an hour in order to make my overhead. All right. So that's a little tricky. I think I've got everything. How do I determine the percentage? So the percentage would equal the allocation rate divided by the hourly rate, 26%. That's about right. So if I go to 5, 35%. Go to 10. That seems closer to correct. So we're going to go to 5. So overhead rate, 42% based on these numbers. Okay, some of this is not realistic, but you get an idea. Okay, so we're saying it should be at least 25% based on this little worksheet. Actually, because we should have probably 10 guys. If we have an overhead of 30,000 a month, you should be working 10 folks. So at least. So that equals this times 12, 360,000 a year. Actually, you should be able to do that with just a couple guys. I'm doing something wrong. I'm going to look at this again, and I think I'm right, but I want to double check, and I'm going to write up a very specific. I'll do a quick video that covers just developing your overhead and how you can figure that out. I think I'm correct, but I want to make sure. So for now, I'm going to use 25% for overhead, 15% for profit. Okay. And I'm going to change this to 8.13% and 8.13% just to match what's out there. So anyway, so you got this working here. I want to change that to there. All right. So my total estimate, my total bid should be 12,966. All right. At a minimum. If I'm going to hit all these numbers, that's what I think it's going to cost to do what I just did. With that in mind, you have to make a business decision. So what will your bid price be? Well, I'm not bidding against anybody. I think I'm pretty lean on a lot of things. These are the questions you're asking yourself. If that's the case, then maybe I should put this to 14%. Or the other thing is, it's not really that complex. Let's change this out. Maybe I'm going to do a 0% there. And the complexity wasn't that bad. And I think I want the job. Okay, now I'm below 12,000 and I've got this odd number. That's a sellable number. We're going to go with that price. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it special as a value. And why I do that is because if I want to change this out, if I want to go back to 15%, this is my bid price and I'm just checking to see if there's anything, how much it is. If I did it cut and paste, what'll happen is every time I change these, this bid price is going to change. So I want to compare what my bid price is to what my estimate is when I play around with these numbers. Okay. That's essentially it. So you build these models for each one. You go down the scopes. You do all these little things. It's nice and easy, nice and clean. When you're doing a job walk, you take hand notes and then you copy these notes onto this project. This is your essentially your modeling book. You can call this your bid book, or whatever the hell you want to call it. I think that's probably all I got for this one. Oh, yeah. We're going to do another one. In the very next one, we're going to do takeoffs, and I'll show you how to do that.